It's pretty rare for a single leader to completely remake a nation in their own image. But that's exactly what Margaret Thatcher did. She didn't just run Britain for 11 years. She fundamentally rewired its economy, its society, and its whole identity on the world stage.
And this quote, wow, it pretty much says it all. She delivered this line to a roaring crowd, and it wasn't just a clever soundbite, it was a mission statement. It was her throwing down the gauntlet to the old way of doing things, promising a style of leadership that was going to be stubborn, determined, and yeah, often confrontational.
So you've got to ask, right? How on earth does a grocer's daughter from a small English town, a woman who started her career as a chemist, rise to become a political giant nicknamed the Iron Lady by the Soviets? Well, to get a handle on the Iron Lady, first we have to understand the Britain that created her.
To really get Thatcher, we have to travel back in time. See, she didn't just appear out of a vacuum. She was a reaction, a really radical solution to a national crisis. Britain felt like it was adrift, struggling with its post-empire identity and facing a massive economic mess.
The 1970s in the UK were, frankly, a disaster. Inflation was through the roof, and the all-powerful trade unions seemed to be in a constant state of war with the government, leading to crippling strikes. This all came to a head in the famous Winter of Discontent. I mean, can you imagine? Widespread strikes brought the country to a standstill. Rubbish was literally piling up in the streets of London. For a lot of people, it felt like the system was just completely broken.
But her ideas for fixing all this, well, they weren't cooked up in some think tank in London. Nope. The roots go way, way deeper, back to her childhood in the small market town of Grantham.
This slide here really breaks down her whole worldview, and it all comes from her upbringing. Think about it. Her strict Methodist faith drilled into her a powerful sense of personal responsibility and duty. Living right above her dad's grocery stop, she learned the hard way about balancing the books. You simply cannot spend money you don't have. And watching her father, who is a local politician, she developed this deep distrust of big government. For her, these weren't theories. This was just common sense.
And she was just as disciplined when it came to her career. She starts out as a chemist, then makes a really strategic move to become a tax lawyer to get that financial know-how. She gets into Parliament in '59 and just steadily works her way up. And then, in 1975, she causes a political earthquake by winning the leadership of her party. She was a total outsider, a woman in a man's world, and she had just taken down the establishment. The stage was set.
So she gets to number 10 Downing Street. And she is not there to just tinker around the edges. No way. She saw herself as a surgeon, and she believed Britain needed major surgery to survive.
Her first tool was something called monetarism. It sounds complicated, but the idea was pretty simple, even if it was brutal. To kill runaway inflation, you had to cut off its fuel, money. That meant jacking up interest rates and making some really deep, painful cuts to public spending. It was harsh medicine for sure, but in her eyes, absolutely essential.
And wow, did that medicine have side effects? Just look at this. As those high interest rates bit down on industry, unemployment, it didn't just rise, it exploded. It more than doubled in just 3 years. This absolutely devastated the old industrial parts of the country and left some really deep scars that are still there today.
But here's the thing. For Thatcher, this was the price you had to pay. Because if you look at this chart, you'll see that her number one enemy, inflation, started to fall and fall fast. So in her mind, and for her supporters, the pain was actually proof that the cure was working.
Okay, so pillar number 2 of her revolution was privatization. Her belief here was straightforward. The government stinks at running businesses like phone companies or airlines. Her solution? Sell them off.
And the scale of this was just massive. We're talking about household names. British Telecom, British Gas, British Airways, companies that had been part of the fabric of British life for decades, now being sold to the public. The idea was to create what she called a shareholding democracy, to fundamentally change the relationship between people and the state.
But none of this economic change could happen without taking on the biggest political force in the country besides the government itself, the trade unions. And that led to the final showdown, the year-long miners' strike. This wasn't just a strike. It was basically a civil war without guns. It was bitter, it was violent, but unlike past leaders, Thatcher absolutely refused to back down. And her victory didn't just end the strike, it shattered the power of the unions for a generation.
All right, so she'd shown she was tough at home. It wasn't long before she started projecting that same iron will across the globe. And then came the Falklands. Argentina invades these tiny islands, 8,000 miles from Britain. A lot of people thought a military response was impossible, a crazy gamble. But Thatcher, she didn't blink. She sent the task force. The victory was a game changer. It transformed her from a prime minister fighting economic battles into a revered war leader and really cemented that Iron Lady image around the world.
On the world stage, her most important relationship was with U.S. President Ronald Reagan. They were totally on the same page, ideological soulmates who believed in free markets, small government, and a very tough stance against the Soviet Union. Together, they were this political power couple who really defined the 1980s and helped speed up the end of the Cold War.
But here's the classic twist in the story, right? The very thing that made her so strong, that absolute, unshakable conviction, that refusal to turn, it ended up being her undoing.
The policy that lit the fuse was the community charge, but everybody called it the poll tax. In theory, the logic was to make local government more accountable by having every adult pay the same flat fee. But what that meant in practice was that a billionaire duke paid the exact same amount as his gardener. You can imagine how well that went over.
People were furious. I mean, absolutely furious. You had mass protests, millions of people refusing to pay, and it all boiled over into a full-blown violent riot right in the middle of London. The poll tax became the ultimate symbol that maybe the prime minister had stopped listening. And you know how it often goes in politics? It's the attack from a trusted ally that does the real damage. For Thatcher, that was Sir Geoffrey Howe. He'd been with her from the beginning. And he gets up in Parliament and just tears her leadership apart in his resignation speech. That was the signal. It gave her opponents the courage they needed, and the leadership challenge that followed forced her out of power.
So just like that, the Iron Lady was gone. But the world she had built? Oh, that was here to stay. And her legacy is something we are still grappling with today.
And this, right here, was maybe her ultimate victory. She didn't just win elections. She won the whole argument. Privatization, deregulation, weakened unions, all the things she fought for became the new normal. She shifted the political landscape so much that even her opponents in the Labour Party, when they finally got back in power, basically had to govern in the world Thatcher had created. She had set the new rules of the game.
See, that brings us back to the big question. Was she the savior who rescued a failing Britain from the brink, or was she the architect of a more divided, more unequal society? The fact that we are still fiercely debating that question decades later tells you everything you need to know about the powerful, polarizing, and undeniable impact of the grocer's daughter from Grantham.